The morning always begins in silence. Long before the world stirs, before the first sound of footsteps or engines, there is that quiet breath that belongs only to you. It is the proof that life, once again, has chosen you. Yet most people treat it as routine, not a miracle. For years, I did too. I woke up each day not to live, but to continue. My thoughts already belonged to noise, my heart already enslaved to expectation. It took me 10 years to understand that every sunrise is an invitation to start over, not to repeat. You see, we often speak of transformation as if it were thunder, loud, cinematic, visible to the world. But transformation is more like dawn. It begins quietly, in gradual light, in the discipline no one sees. I used to chase the noise, success, recognition, validation. But the more I chased, the emptier I felt. Peace is never found in applause. It lives in the stillness that you keep when no one else is watching. The Stoics knew this truth centuries ago. What you control is not the world, but the state of your own soul. Marcus Aurelius woke before sunrise and reminded himself that people would test him, that life would be unfair, yet he still chose virtue. Seneca wrote that the man who welcomes each dawn with gratitude has already conquered half of fear. And Epictetus, born a slave, discovered that freedom begins not when the chains break, but when the mind stops obeying them. These were not ideas. They were instructions for surviving chaos with dignity. I did not understand them until I had lost everything that made me comfortable. When the noise disappears, you meet yourself for the first time. You discover how afraid you are of your own silence. You realize how dependent you've become on distraction to escape truth. For me, that moment came one early morning after a sleepless night. My heart felt heavy, but the world outside was still. I sat there with no music, no phone, no audience, just breath and regret. I had failed, not because I lacked opportunity, but because I lacked command of my mornings. The hours before dawn had always belonged to anxiety. That morning, for the first time, they belonged to intention. I decided that before I spoke to the world, I would speak to my soul. Before I opened my phone, I would open my mind. Before I moved toward ambition, I would move toward purpose. It felt unnatural at first. My body resisted discipline the way a wounded animal resists healing. But the more I practiced, the quieter the resistance became. Stillness started to feel like strength, not emptiness. And then it struck me, I had spent years waiting for motivation, but motivation never wakes before the sun. Discipline does. Discipline is what greets the dawn, what keeps you moving when no one claps, what whispers that peace is built through repetition, not excitement. The first act of transformation is to master the beginning of your day, because how you greet the morning is how you command your life. One morning, as the light slowly filled the room, I wrote a single sentence that changed everything. Today, I am responsible for what I allow to live in my mind. That sentence became my fortress. When doubt tried to enter, I asked if it deserved residence. When anger knocked, I asked if it paid rent in peace. Most thoughts didn't survive the inspection. Over time, my mornings became lighter. I was no longer a prisoner of every emotion that rose. I had become their observer, not their victim. If these words are finding you now, it is not by chance. Something within you is tired of drifting. You are ready to build. And if you've listened this far, it means that somewhere in your heart, a quiet voice has begun to rise above the noise. So listen to it. Let this be your sign. Subscribe to this channel, not for numbers or habit, but as a small act of faith, a way of walking closer to God and receiving light each day through words that bless your morning. Write something in the comments that becomes a seed for your next sunrise. Peace, clarity, strength, discipline, growth. Let it not be a wish, but a vow. From that morning on, I began to see how every sunrise is a mirror. It reflects not what the world is, but who you've chosen to be within it. When you start your day in gratitude, the world cannot defeat you, because gratitude transforms every challenge into purpose. I learned that even pain can be sacred when it is faced with awareness. Most people pray for a life without storms. The Stoic prays for the strength to walk through them with grace. And I realized that my years of struggle were not wasted. They were preparation for this quiet mastery. 10 years taught me that the most dangerous habit is postponing your awakening. We say, "I'll change when I have time." But time is not a gift you receive. It's a responsibility you hold. Every dawn asks the same question. Will you rise as a servant of yesterday or as a master of today? I had served yesterday long enough. From that day forward, I began serving purpose. I stopped chasing what could be lost. I stopped living to impress the distracted. I stopped measuring peace by noise. Instead, I began with what was always within reach: breath, body, word, silence. Those became my tools for rebuilding. Each morning, I breathed slowly until my mind obeyed. I moved my body with care to remind myself I was still alive. I wrote one promise I could keep. I allowed silence to fill the space that used to belong to fear. Those 4 pillars, breath, movement, truth, silence, rebuilt my inner architecture. And something unexpected happened. The world outside began to follow. People treated me differently, not because they changed, but because I no longer approached them with chaos. When you master your mornings, you stop demanding that others regulate your emotions. You stop being reactive. You become centered, and centered people transform rooms without speaking. The calm you build before sunrise is the same calm that guides you through the storm. The Stoics believed that life rewards the one who prepares before the test, not during it. I saw that truth unfold in every obstacle. When frustration came, I remembered my breath. When temptation whispered, I remembered my promise. When anxiety rose, I returned to silence. Slowly, my reactions became choices. My emotions no longer controlled me. They informed me. That was freedom. Not the kind the world sells, but the kind only discipline can earn. And here's a truth I wish someone had told me earlier. Every morning is a negotiation between who you were and who you're becoming. The version that wins is the one you feed before sunrise. Feed distraction, and you repeat the past. Feed intention, and you reshape destiny. This is the hidden secret of transformation. It never happens in the future. It happens in the first hour of today. As I continued the practice, I began to sense something divine behind the routine. I realized that the morning is not only a physical beginning, but a spiritual one. Each breath felt like a prayer, each act of discipline like an offering. When I opened my eyes to the light, I no longer saw it as sunlight. I saw it as mercy. The chance to begin again was proof of grace. And grace, once recognized, changes how you live. The years that followed were not easier, but they were clearer. I still faced failure, heartbreak, loss, but each of them now had context. They were not punishments. They were sculptors. They carved away everything that wasn't meant to stay, and in their place, they left strength that no comfort could have built. Looking back, I realize I was never learning how to control life. I was learning how to cooperate with it. The Stoics call this amor fati, love of fate. It doesn't mean blind acceptance. It means trusting that even the unwanted holds value. When you rise with this mindset, the morning no longer asks you to fight the world. It invites you to align with it. That is where the transformation begins. Not in success or recognition, but in the quiet surrender of dawn. When your soul whispers, "I am ready to live with intention." Discipline is the architecture of the soul. It is not built in a day, and it is not designed for comfort. It is carved in silence, under pressure, when no one is watching. The morning taught me that every action, no matter how small, carries the potential to shape eternity. But discipline, I discovered, is not about punishment or rigidity. It is about liberation. Freedom is not the absence of restraint. It is mastery over impulse. Most people confuse comfort with peace, but comfort dulls the edge of purpose. True peace demands effort. In the beginning, I resisted discipline because it felt unnatural. My mind argued that I deserved rest, that I had earned the right to slow down. But the Stoics remind us that indulgence is the first sign of inner weakness. When you obey every impulse, you become the servant of your desires. When you master them, you become their commander. Each decision you make either strengthens the walls of your fortress or leaves a door open to chaos. I had left many doors open. I had allowed distraction to live rent-free in my mind. The cost was clarity, and I was bankrupt. Discipline began when I stopped negotiating with laziness. Every time I postponed an action, I was silently saying to my future self, "You are less important than my comfort." That realization cut deep. I began to view each morning as a battle between the temporary and the eternal. The temporary wanted me to stay in bed. The eternal whispered, "Rise, there is work to be done." Slowly, I learned that greatness is not the result of extraordinary talent, but of ordinary repetition performed with devotion. The same repetition that others call boring, the Stoic calls sacred. There were days I failed, days when my mind rebelled and discipline felt like punishment, but those were the days that taught me the most. The Stoics say, "The obstacle is the way." I used to think that meant I had to enjoy pain. It doesn't. It means that pain is not the enemy. Resistance is. The mind that complains at every challenge is the same mind that will crumble under pressure. I began to welcome small difficulties like training weights for the soul. Each obstacle became a chance to prove to myself that I could stay composed while the world demanded reaction. Seneca wrote that no man becomes wise by accident. Wisdom requires training, just as the body requires exercise. The mind must be conditioned daily, or it becomes weak and unguarded. I began a practice. Each morning, before I faced the world, I wrote down one principle to live by that day. Sometimes it was patience, sometimes gratitude, sometimes courage. At first, it felt symbolic, even naive. But over time, I realized that what you repeat becomes what you believe, and what you believe becomes how you act. The transformation was slow, invisible at first. People around me didn't notice a difference, but I did. My reaction softened. My anger shortened. My focus sharpened. I no longer needed to announce my growth. It showed in my calm. Marcus Aurelius said that the best revenge is to be unlike your enemy. I understood it now. The true victory is to maintain inner harmony in a world addicted to outrage. The world rewards noise, but peace rewards longevity. I stopped trying to win arguments and started winning my mornings. Each day became a ritual. I would wake, breathe, and thank the unseen forces that allowed me another chance. Then I would remind myself of this. Life is not something happening to you, but something responding to you. Every attitude, every reaction, every emotion is an invitation or rejection. If you invite chaos with irritation, chaos will stay. If you invite gratitude with awareness, peace will grow. I realized that discipline is not only physical, it is spiritual. It is choosing to govern the energy you emit into the world. There were moments when fatigue tested me. The body wanted comfort. The mind wanted distraction. I had to remember that fatigue is not a signal to stop. It is a signal to strengthen focus. The Stoics faced hunger, exile, torture, yet they remained unbroken because they understood something modern life forgets. The world cannot enslave a disciplined mind. Epictetus, once bound in chains, said that no man is free unless he masters himself. I carried that truth into every morning, every task, every setback. When discipline replaces doubt, you no longer wait for conditions to improve. You become the condition. The deeper I practiced, the clearer I saw the illusion of control. We think we control outcomes, but outcomes belong to fate. What we truly control are our efforts, our words, our perceptions. Discipline is not about forcing life into obedience. It's about aligning yourself with what you can command, your response. When you master response, fate loses its power to humiliate you. The world may still test you, but it cannot move you. That is serenity. To be unshaken, not because nothing happens, but because nothing within collapses when it does. I began to notice something strange. The more disciplined I became, the lighter I felt. I expected discipline to weigh me down with rules, but instead it lifted me from confusion. Each small victory, waking early, finishing a task, keeping a promise, felt like collecting fragments of my integrity that had been scattered through years of distraction. When you rebuild integrity, you stop needing validation. Your peace becomes private wealth. The mornings became sacred ground. The sun's first light no longer felt ordinary. It was like an unspoken contract, another chance to live deliberately. There were mornings when I still failed, when thoughts wandered, when I slipped into old habits. But I learned not to hate failure. I learned to study it. Failure is not the opposite of discipline. It is the instructor of discipline. Each fall exposes the muscle that needs strength. Each mistake teaches humility. Without failure, discipline becomes arrogance. With failure, it becomes wisdom. Seneca once warned, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." I began to see how most of my pain came from rehearsing future fears. Discipline quieted that noise. When I focused on what I could do now, breathe, move, act, fear had no room to expand. Anxiety is a parasite that feeds on inaction. The moment you move, it starves. I realized that doing the work, even imperfectly, was better than perfect hesitation. There was also beauty in the monotony. At first, repetition felt dull. But soon, I saw that repetition is what makes art beautiful, music powerful, and life meaningful. The sun rises every day the same way, yet it never fails to awe those who pay attention. Why should our own rituals be different? The discipline of waking, writing, thinking, and breathing became my symphony. Each action a note. Each morning a performance of grace in motion. The greatest transformation happened quietly. I began to feel gratitude for difficulty. The mornings that felt heavy often became the most rewarding. Pain sharpened awareness. Discipline turned pain into purpose. I understood why the Stoics spoke of joy not as pleasure, but as alignment with truth. True joy is waking each day with a clear conscience and a strong mind. It is knowing that whatever comes, you are prepared to meet it with dignity. This was not the kind of joy that laughs loudly or needs to be posted. It was subtle, deep, enduring, like a flame that doesn't flicker in the wind. That flame grew every time I resisted the temptation to break my own promises. I realized that self-betrayal is the heaviest burden a man can carry. Every time you say you'll do something and don't, your soul loses trust in you. Discipline rebuilds that trust. It tells your inner self, "You can rely on me now." And when that happens, everything changes. You stop waiting for others to believe in you because you finally believe in yourself. You stop craving approval because you know your path. You stop fearing solitude because solitude becomes sanctuary. This is what the ancients meant when they said the wise man is self-sufficient. Not that he rejects others, but that he no longer depends on them for peace. Eventually, I stopped asking, "How do I stay disciplined?" and began asking, "Who am I without it?" Because once you taste the clarity that discipline brings, chaos becomes unbearable. It's not that I became perfect. It's that I finally saw that the battle was never against time, the world, or circumstance. It was always against the weaker version of myself that wanted comfort over growth. 10 years taught me this. Discipline is love in action. Love for your future self. Love for your purpose. Love for the divine order that shapes your path. It's not a cage. It's a compass. It doesn't restrict your freedom. It reveals it. And as the mornings passed, I realized that discipline was not something I was building. It was something that had been waiting for me all along, buried beneath excuses and noise. All I had to do was return to it. Peace is not the absence of storms. It is the calm eye that stands unshaken while the world turns in chaos. I used to believe peace was something to be found, hidden in distant lands, quiet monasteries, or books with golden wisdom. But I learned that peace is not discovered. It is built, brick by brick, morning by morning, decision by decision, and the material of that peace is made of discipline, reflection, and faith. Without these, even the calmest days will find a way to disturb you. The Stoics taught that tranquility comes when your inner world stops depending on the outer one. But that truth sounds simple until life begins to shake. The moment the unexpected strikes, the loss, the insult, the failure, you discover how fragile your peace really was. I saw that my calmness was often conditional. I was peaceful only when the day agreed with me. But true, Stoic peace is unconditional. It's a decision you renew every morning, to remain sovereign over your reactions. The world doesn't promise serenity. It promises noise, endless demands, comparisons, judgments, and distractions. You can't stop the noise, but you can stop giving it power. That's what I realized when I began practicing silence. Not the silence of sound, but the silence of thought, the deliberate pause between reaction and response. That gap became the throne of my awareness. In that small space, I could observe anger before it turned into words. I could see fear before it shaped decisions. That pause was where peace was born. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that our lives are dyed by the color of our thoughts. I began to test that truth. On days when I woke with gratitude, everything seemed lighter, even the tasks I disliked. On days when I woke with resentment, the same world felt cruel. The circumstances hadn't changed, only the color of my mind. Peace, then, is not a gift from the world. It's a color you paint reality with. The Stoics understood that the mind is the artist of every experience. If you let it remain untrained, it will use fear as its brush. I started studying my own thoughts the way a craftsman studies wood. I watched how some thoughts came sharp, ready to cut through patience, while others were soft, almost invisible, but corrosive. Over time, I noticed patterns. Thoughts of comparison led to envy. Thoughts of entitlement led to anger. Thoughts of gratitude led to peace. I realized that the mind, like a field, grows whatever you water most. So I began to water stillness. Every morning became a sacred rehearsal for inner peace. I would sit before sunrise, before the world intruded, and breathe as slowly as the universe would allow. It wasn't meditation in the modern sense. It was communion. With life, with God, with myself. I would remind myself that every complaint is a prayer for more dissatisfaction. So instead, I began my mornings in quiet gratitude for what was already present: breath, light, time. And as gratitude deepened, my sense of lack dissolved. I no longer woke up chasing something outside. I began to understand what Epictetus meant when he said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for what he has not, but rejoices in what he has." It's easy to repeat that quote. It's hard to live it. But the mornings made it possible. The silence became a mirror. I saw that most of my restlessness came from the illusion that something was missing. The truth is, peace is never missing. It's merely buried under layers of wanting. As the weeks turned into months, my mind transformed. What once felt like a battlefield began to feel like a monastery. My thoughts stopped shouting and began whispering. My desires stopped commanding and began listening. I learned that peace is not won through force, but through surrender. Not surrender to weakness, but to wisdom, to the understanding that you control so little, and yet that little is enough. The Stoics called it amor fati, the love of fate, to not only accept what happens, but to embrace it as necessary. I started practicing this with small things. If the morning coffee spilled, I would say, "It was meant to spill." If plans changed, I would whisper, "So it must be." It wasn't passivity. It was alignment. The moment I stopped fighting the current, I realized the river was already flowing toward peace. All I had to do was stop thrashing. But embracing fate requires humility. The ego resists it. The ego wants control, credit, and victory. Humility silences that noise. I began to see humility not as self-denial but as truthfulness, the honest recognition of what is within and beyond my command. Once you see that distinction clearly, most worries dissolve, because how can you suffer from what is not yours to control? Life tested this understanding. There were days when peace felt unreachable, when anger or sadness tried to reclaim old territory. But even in those storms, something had changed. I no longer feared the emotion itself. I observed it as a guest, not a ruler. The Stoics never said to suppress emotion. They said to guide it, to use it as fire for virtue. Anger could become courage. Sadness could become empathy. Fear could become vigilance. Every emotion, when met with awareness, could become a servant instead of a master. There came a morning when I understood the ultimate Stoic paradox. To be strong, you must first be still. Movement without stillness is chaos. Speech without silence is noise. Desire without discipline is destruction. Stillness, however, is not inactivity. It is motion with direction. It's the quiet strength that allows a tree to stand through storms. That was the kind of peace I was building. Not fragile peace that breaks with inconvenience, but rooted peace that grows deeper with every trial. I began to measure success differently. It was no longer about what I gained, but about what I could keep losing without losing myself. If failure came, could I stay composed? If success came, could I stay humble? If insult came, could I stay kind? That became my metric for growth. I saw that peace is not about escaping life's noise. It's about becoming so centered that noise becomes irrelevant. There were moments of illumination, subtle but powerful. Standing in morning light, I felt the strange understanding that the universe was not against me. It was reflecting me. The chaos outside mirrored the chaos within. When I became peaceful inside, the world appeared peaceful outside. That was the hidden symmetry of existence. The outer world is only ever an echo. If you wish to change it, you must first change the vibration of your own soul. Gratitude became my sword. Silence became my shield, and awareness became my compass. I realized that life doesn't need to be conquered, it needs to be understood, and understanding begins when judgment ends. The Stoics never judged events as good or bad. They saw them as neutral, given by nature for growth. I tried that. When a setback came, I asked, "What is this teaching me?" The question alone transformed despair into curiosity, and curiosity into progress. Seneca said that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I expanded that idea. Peace is what happens when acceptance meets awareness. When you stop resisting what is and start observing what could be transformed, life stops feeling hostile. It becomes a dialogue between your will and divine design. This dialogue deepened in solitude. There's a kind of silence that feels empty and another that feels full of meaning, full of presence. I sought that fullness every morning. No distractions, no screens, just me and the light slowly unfolding across the sky. The Stoics believed that contemplation was a form of worship. In those moments, I understood why. To sit in awareness is to honor the order of creation. To quiet the mind is to let the divine whisper through thought. The transformation was not dramatic, it was subtle, like the slow erosion of anxiety by time. My ambitions didn't disappear, but they evolved. I stopped chasing recognition and started pursuing alignment. The goal was no longer to build a life that looked successful, but to build a soul that felt steady. Each decision, each thought, each reaction became a brick in the architecture of that steadiness. Sometimes I wondered if I was becoming detached from the world, but I realized that detachment is not coldness, it's clarity. It's seeing without being enslaved by what you see. Detachment allowed me to love more purely, to give without need, to act without anxiety. The Stoics did not withdraw from life. They engaged it deeply but refused to be devoured by it. That balance became my pursuit, and so I began to see every challenge differently. Rejection was protection. Delay was redirection. Pain was purification. I stopped labeling life as unfair and started calling it precise. Everything happened exactly as it needed to for me to practice virtue. Each discomfort became a sacred invitation to grow stronger, wiser, calmer. Years passed. My mornings became temples of gratitude. My actions became prayers of alignment. I no longer rushed through the day. I moved as if every gesture mattered, because it did. How you do anything is how you do everything. The Stoics knew this long before modern wisdom rediscovered it. Peace is not something you find in the grand moments. It's forged in the small ones. The way you breathe, the way you listen, the way you walk through silence. There was one morning, quiet and golden, when I understood the final lesson. Peace is not something you keep, it's something you give. The moment you hold on to it selfishly, it begins to fade. But when you share it, through kindness, patience, presence, it multiplies. The Stoics lived for service. They saw that wisdom without compassion is vanity. So I began to share what I learned, not through words, but through example. When people spoke with me, I wanted them to leave calmer, not more restless. When they looked at my life, I wanted them to see consistency, not performance. That, I realized, is the quiet influence of peace. It changes others without trying to convince them. Now, I wake each morning not asking what the day will bring, but asking what I will bring to the day. Because life is not a matter of luck or fate. It is a reflection of the state of your soul. The Stoic morning is not about routine. It is about rebirth. Every dawn is an invitation to rise again, wiser, calmer, closer to truth. So, if you've listened this far, take this truth with you. Everything you seek is already within. The silence you fear holds the answers you've been avoiding. The discipline you resist hides the peace you crave. The faith you doubt is the key to your liberation. The Stoics didn't teach you how to escape life. They taught you how to live it with unshakable grace. If this message touched your spirit, subscribe and walk with us. Let this channel be your morning sanctuary, a place where wisdom meets faith and the soul remembers its strength. Write below in the comments something you want to manifest through your discipline. Maybe words like clarity, peace, or gratitude. Each word you write becomes a seed for the future. Let's plant them together. And remember this, you are not behind. You are exactly where the universe needs you to be to learn the lesson that transforms the next chapter of your life. Do not rush. Do not despair. Build your mornings, and your mornings will build you. The next lesson may surprise you even more, because what comes next could transform the way you see life forever.